can't exactly run away from it. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like women start to age like milk or anything. There's some women who even in their 30s look absolutely fucking amazing. But when it comes to guys, a lot of guys, whenever they clock 30, will usually start to experience more attention from women than they're probably used to. And of course, over time, that's gonna make them feel like they're the shit. So, of course, they're gonna act like they're the prize. And there are different reasons for that and everything, and I will get to them. It's just...
The royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
Welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who likes his women the same exact way he likes his yogurt. He is also a man who may consider adding running his mouth to his cardio routine. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. I am here to talk about lines. Now, if I was on a hip-hop podcast or I was discussing drugs, that would probably sound like a pretty interesting thing, but saying lines when you're on a relationship podcast just kind of makes it sound like you're about to discuss boundaries, and sometimes that shit can sound a bit boring. So instead, let me just go with, I'm gonna discuss a bunch of age on this episode, and some lines around that. And hopefully it shouldn't be too bad, for the most part. Although, should you think that it is bad, should you think that it's good, should you want to give your feedback, or should you want to suggest topics that are of this nature or just of the nature of love, sex, and relationships, then the place to hit me up on IG is at the Breakdown_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the Breakdown Podcast, and on X, it is at Bagaka the D. The DMs are always open, and I would be more than happy to, take your thoughts and handle them accordingly. Of which, considering that you've already listened thus far, thank you so much. I hope you listen all the way till the end, and I hope you actually enjoy what you're listening to, and it's not just the shit that you're using to occupy the silence, but that's entirely a you thing. Either way, I am thankful that you are listening, and I do need to get on with today's episode, considering that there's a bunch of age that I need to talk about, but I need to start from the negative side before I can get to the positive side, or at least positive for men. And for me to start from the negative side, I need to start by discussing a story that I saw fairly recently, which came from Meru County, where a 24-year-old male was caught by the police in a lodging with a 16-year-old high school girl. Now, I will not get into the details of it. I have a video of it, of which it's very pointless because there's not that much information that I'll be able to pull that I haven't already given. But the reason I decided to bring this to the podcast isn't necessarily the story itself. It's some of the comments that I saw on this, because this was a story that I saw posted up on X. Now, I saw two comments that, I kid you the hell not, like, maybe it's just a me thing, but personally, if you were my homie and you gave either one of these comments, I'd probably classify you as a pedophile and I'd stop interacting with you. Now, I know guys usually don't jump to such conclusions, blah blah shit like that. And for me to give a pretty good explanation as to why it is I have come to this conclusion, I need to read the comments out. So the first one said, and I quote, 16 years, you'll find that she has more experience than the guy. A sane judge should give him 6 months in prison plus a fine of 50,000. The girl should also get 2 months in juvenile. It's about correction, not punishment. End quote. Now, the next person said, and I quote, funny, there are parts of the world where the age of consent is 15 years, even in Africa. We set high standards on sex and age, but at the same time line up and vote in corrupt murderers. Hypocrites. End quote. And interestingly enough, the guy even decided to post up a chart where the age of consent is, and there were places where it was as low as 12. But anyways, I will hold back on that one. Now, I can understand. Well, actually, no, I can't understand. This is just wrong. This is about as wrong as it gets. Like, I can get that guys might be missing out on pussy and may want to take advantage because, I don't know, there's horny teenagers and some of them look really, really good and some of them might seem a little bit mature. But fuck that shit. Like, there is no way in this country of Kenya, where the age of consent is 18, that you can justify you choosing to bang someone that is under the age of 18 and yet you are well into the age of 20. Like, that shit just cannot fly anywhere with just about any judge. This is just textbook defilement. And the thing is, there's guys in the comment section, even beyond these comments, that were basically trying to justify the entire thing, and they're talking about, the justice system versus morality, blah blah. And look, as someone who has had the whole discussion and debate of morality versus legality when it comes to age of consent, I would very easily tell you that it only makes sense when you're talking about people within the age of 18 to around 21, maybe 22, max 23. Although even then, that already feels like a stretch. Like, that's when you can bring up the whole conversation of morality versus legality, because an 18-year-old dating a 30-year-old is legally okay, but morally not so much, according to some people, or, depending on who it is that is trying to make that distinction. Also, genders might matter in this case. But when you're looking at someone who is underage and someone who is above the age of 18, not just above the age of 18, 6 years beyond it, that becomes a little bit much. Because I know I was in high school, maybe 12-ish years ago? But I know for a fact, like, age differences when you're that young are a pretty big deal. Like, when you're looking at someone who's 14 dating a 16-year-old, for them, they consider that to be a massive age gap. 16 and 18, not as much, but it's still pretty large by a lot of high schoolers' standards. So by the time you're a 16-year-old dating an 18-year-old, regardless of gender, like, it is a pretty interesting and very big deal. Because when you're 16, and let's say I'm a 16-year-old boy and I am, for example, trying to be with, or I'm dating an 18-year-old girl, then I either have to have looks, I have to have serious game, or both for me to actually be able to get with an 18-year-old girl, because she is looking much further ahead. If you are looking at a 16-year-old girl dating an 18-year-old guy, that babe has to be fine as fuck for the 18-year-old guy to be like, screw the 19-year-old girls that are probably, past high school level, screw the 17-year-olds, screw the 18-year-olds, let me go ahead and start dating this 16-year-old. Like, there's also the thing that I always like to mention whenever I'm discussing age and consent and everything, about how when I clocked 18, one of the most interesting pieces of information I was given, which came out as a joke, was, happy birthday Denver, you're now legal enough to be a pedophile. But pushing all of that aside, pushing all the 18-year-old talk that I've mentioned aside, this girl was with a 24-year-old man. That's an 8-year age difference. Like, to a 16-year-old, that is basically the near equivalent of someone who is 30 dating someone who is like 50 or 60 years old. It's absolutely monstrous for someone who is 16 to be with a guy that is 8 years her senior. That is basically 50% of her age on top of her current age. Does that not make sense to dude? So when some guys are busy talking about how, the 16-year-old might have fucked a bunch more people than this 24-year-old dude, like, it doesn't matter how many people she's had on top of her. Like, she could have sat on over 100 dicks for all I care, but at the end of the day, she is still underage, and that is something that you cannot get past. Now, you can talk about age of consent and the fact that there's no rules and regulations that determine what age of consent is supposed to be. But at the end of the day, if you are in a country where the age of consent is 18 and you're sleeping with a 16-year-old, you are basically looking for problems. And I say this because there's nothing that you can brag about there. You can't talk about it. Hell, even though you might find it enjoyable, at the end of the day, if this girl decides to report you to the nearest police station for statutory rape, of which it is classified as defilement, you are fucked. There is no getting around this. There is no getting out of it. Like, if you are looking at a teenager and you are a fully grown adult, especially beyond university, then honestly, there's something wrong with you, in my opinion. Like, looking at someone that is underage and thinking to yourself, I want to shag this person, and then going along with it, like, regardless of your gender or the age of consent or whatever the bullshit you will try to bring in front of this, there's just something wrong with you. Like, I may be pro-man and I can understand how power dynamics can benefit men and shit like that, but still, like, even though I will speak for men, even though I will speak about men, and even though I will speak about women, this I cannot condone. If I were to condone this, then I would be pro-bullshit, of which I'm not, so I'm going to leave it at that. And I will move things on to our main topic of this episode, which also has some discussion of age. because, well, people like considering themselves the prize, which honestly nowadays I hear people say and it just sounds a little bit cringe to me. But if that's your cup of tea, if that's what you'd like to refer to yourself as, then go do you, boo. But the thing is, over time, it seems like some people realize that they are no longer the prize, and some people realize that they are the prize, and that can have some very fortunate or unfortunate consequences for either side, depending on which side decides to feel like they're the prize. Now, on a clip from the Uncork and Wine podcast, some ladies were busy discussing how men, whenever they hit 30 plus and they still aren't married yet, they usually tend to think that they are the prize and they act a certain way. And I would like to say more about it, but I am just going to let the clip play, then I can get into my thoughts on it. So, without further ado,
guys that are not married in their 30s think they are the prize. Guys, those men want you to chase them. He becomes the woman in the relationship.
Thank you for saying this. I thought I was the only one
They
experiencing
become
this.
the woman. It's like you can hear that. No, but I will say, I'm talking to a guy. He's a very nice guy.
Oh, we see you.
We're not dating, but we talk. I'm just waiting for him to ask me out.
okay, so they act like they're the prize because they are, and interestingly enough, it's y'all that made them the prize. Okay, sorry. I kind of went ahead of myself for a little bit, but I hate to belabor a point for too damn long. And the interesting part about all of this is, in as much as I hate sounding like every other content creator that discusses relationships on the internet and talks about, when guys get to a certain age, they start aging like wine and shit, it's kind of true. I've watched this shit happen over the past couple of years and I can't exactly run away from it. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like women start to age like milk or anything. There's some women who even in their 30s look absolutely fucking amazing. But when it comes to guys, a lot of guys, whenever they clock 30, will usually start to experience more attention from women than they're probably used to. And of course, over time, that's gonna make them feel like they're the shit. So, of course, they're gonna act like they're the prize. And there are different reasons for that and everything, and I will get to them. It's just, it is so interesting when you hear women complaining about guys above the age of 30 acting like they're the shit, or quote unquote, like she said, behaving like women. And I also will get into why that is supposedly supposed to be a sneak diss, but at the end of the day, it really isn't. Now, when it comes to guys, you find that over time, especially for guys that are past the age of 30 and shit, hell, even into their 40s, they will probably tell you for a fact that as you grow older as a guy, how you get attention from women is going to vary and change. So especially when you look at from when you're in your 20s, you may not get as much attention and it probably won't be all that good. You probably may not get as much attention from women, more so your age mates. But the moment you clock 30, or at least when you start clocking 30 plus, you start getting a lot more attention from women, and that will come with its own sets of reasons. So the most common one that people will usually say is that now you're making money. People will talk about how, you're working super hard in your 20s, of which, even though you don't really work hard, provided that you have probably even stayed in employment for a couple of years and you've been progressing, by the time you're in your 30s, you're probably making pretty good bank. And you making pretty good bank means that you can afford to get some of the nicer things in life. So you can probably afford to move to a much nicer place. You can probably get yourself a car or a nicer car. You can probably afford to dress better or buy more expensive shit just in general. And that, of course, is a particularly good sign. Having some level of financial stability or having good financial health, at least visually speaking, is obviously a pretty good sign of a good mate. So, of course, you will end up seeming more attractive to women. Also, there's the other aspect of maturity. Now, in as much as it might seem like it's more of a myth, you may actually find that there's a lot of people that feel that the more you age, the more you are expected to be wiser and quote unquote more mature. Now, of course, this is mostly bullshit because, there's a lot of people that are just dumb. Even dumb people grow old, just so you know. And so you find that there are guys that, because they are perceived to be more mature, so if they just decide to go and, hang around women that are much younger than them, will seem like a more attractive option because he's an older guy, so he is believed to be more mature. And the whole maturity aspect of it does kind of make a guy seem a little bit more interesting or seem a little bit more of a catch, which is why there's a lot of women that talk about wanting to be with a mature guy, wanting to be with a quote-unquote real man. And when a guy is in his 30s, they tend to exude some of those qualities, so some women usually tend to fall to such guys. So as a result, if there's multiple women that are doing that and these guys are getting that attention, of course they're going to feel like they're the prize. They don't have to work as hard to get pussy. They don't have to put in as much effort to be with a babe. And if anything, if they want to settle down at that point in time, they won't just be driven by looks. They will want to know what it is that you do with your life, or at least, can you fulfill certain duties, certain wifely duties? Can you cook and clean? How is your hygiene? How do you carry yourself? Do you carry yourself with demeanor? How respectful are you to me? Stuff like that. And as such, you find that these guys are probably going to be more selective. So by default, whether you like it or you don't, these guys are just going to be more selective. And because women didn't, get with them a lot earlier in life, or at least didn't end up locking them down a lot earlier in life, now they're just as single as the ladies that probably could have, or maybe should have even locked them down a lot earlier. So of course they're gonna feel like the prize, because now they're attracting even more women than in their 20s. They don't have to work as hard. Maybe they might spend a little bit more money, but they have even more in their account. So of course, y'all made them the prizes because you guys basically started giving them attention when they started doing a lot better for themselves. Now, with that said, there was also the bit where this woman was busy talking about how they start quote-unquote behaving like women, which some people are like, okay, so that's how we're going, of which I don't know if it was expected to be a sneak diss or it was just supposed to be a live diss to guys because we're not taking on hard shit anymore. Because, okay, so normally, back in the day, you'd hear about how men would go and they'd work hard and they'd get a babe and they'd put in the work to be with a babe, and they'd be putting all of this effort so that they can get them to be their girlfriend, eventually their wife, and they'd be working hard almost non-stop. You don't hear guys from 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago and beyond enjoying life when they're fully grown adults. But nowadays you hear guys who are in their 30s, their 40s enjoying life. And enjoying the fact that they have money, even though they've aged, even though they aren't married and shit. They talk about how they enjoy life, and they will talk about how they want to be pampered. So of course I can get why a woman would claim that these over 30 men of today want to behave like women, or they want to be treated like women. It's because a lot of guys are starting to enjoy the fact that they have the money. They're enjoying the fact that they're in their 30s, because them being in their 30s means that they have a little bit more access to disposable income. They have a little bit more in terms of knowledge and experience, and they can basically just go and enjoy life without having to think, what if I save up for this? Oh, what if I get a girlfriend and then now I have to start spending money on A, B, C, and D? Or if I had kids, I'd be blowing all of this money on school fees and shit. Of which, considering that now they don't have to think about that shit, because, if anything, especially nowadays, people know that the future isn't certain. COVID happened and that shifted a lot of people's mindsets. Of course, these guys are going to want to enjoy themselves. Of course, these guys are going to want to be pampered. They heard stories of how their fathers, their uncles were getting pampered by their girlfriends, and now they want the same, and you expect this guy to just continuously put in effort to be with you, and yet you're not fulfilling your end of the bargain. Niggas were putting effort back in the day for that shit. Because if I bagged a good babe, and she's pretty, but she also has good household skills, then I know that I'm gonna have a pretty babe outside, but she's gonna take care of me inside of the house. And she's gonna be a particularly respectable woman with pretty good demeanor, and is going to seem like a favorable person, not just for me, but for the rest of the squad and for the community and shit. But you want dude to just put in work for you to say how you'd much rather order in and how you hate cooking? Yeah, no. Guys are going to be selective, of course. You can't expect a guy to just want to be with you just because you're beautiful and he thinks you're beautiful and maybe you're smart. Like, you have to offer more to it, just the same way you expect him to fulfill his husband type duties. He also expects you to fulfill your wife type duties, you know? Kind of what I'm trying to say. And the unfortunate reality is, for a lot of women, once they get to that point where they realize that now they have to start putting effort towards being with a guy or being with a guy, especially the guys that are above the age of 30, it's suddenly like a reality hit for them that they're not really that ready to actually accept, because you find that there's this guy that now expects you to actually put in effort to be with him, because if you do not put that effort, he can drop you and he can get someone else. And that quick to dispose mindset isn't something that a lot of women who were previously, considered to be super attractive and used to get a lot of male attention probably aren't used to getting. So it might take a while for some people to adjust. Some people will find it very hard to adjust. Some people may just not adjust at all and will continue moving around busy saying that they need to be approached and they will never approach a man. And, over time, you kind of see the results for themselves. And it gets to that point where approaching and proposing is a more equal level task now for both men and women, because if you want the guy, it's either you approach him or you don't. He probably won't be bothered to do it, and he might probably get another babe that will approach him. So it's probably better for you if you approach the dude, and if the guy is actually interested in you, then maybe he might approach or maybe he might not, especially in this era that is very post Me Too. Then also proposing for stuff, asking for things. Like, now you will have to do that, and the guy may not necessarily say yes to everything, and he may not be the one that is proposing just about everything. People can call it, men are starting to behave like women, but at the same time, if you want something, you might as well ask for it. Like, the age of guys trying to bend over backwards so that they can please a babe is sort of on the outs, especially for guys that are making pretty good money and can entertain multiple women. So you may now start having to propose stuff as well. And I get it. A majority of women would much rather be approached, but when it gets to a point where approaching a dude that you want to be with is your best bet over just letting things go, then it's probably better to just pick up the pace and just get on with it, as opposed to just trying to sit back in your delulu hoping that the guy makes his move. Because if he doesn't make his move, well, you could say that he wasn't meant for you, but you also didn't put any effort. And, at the end of the day, you are now at a position where effort needs to be reciprocated. And the source of said effort won't always come from the man. So you should probably step up and do it. And to kind of conclude all of this, I will tell the women that if you do not want to experience this, if you want to be seen as a prize, if you want to get maximum attention, then it's either you marry early or you get cuffed before the dude is in his 30s, or you just get a guy that is much older than that who will probably want to bag you. Otherwise, you'll need to accept that the tables have turned, and you should probably turn with them. Not necessarily to doggy style, but to at least accept that now you have to start putting in some effort. If it's the relationship that you want, you might as well go ahead and get it. Although, then again, I might be wrong about this, just the same I could be wrong about a lot of other things, so I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the Breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the Breaktime Podcast. And on X, it is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.